Okay. Hi. Well, thanks for joining us, everyone. This is the second in our chats about the lockdown experience, lockdown stories, and I'm really pleased to be joined by Bhairav Patel. Hi, Bhairav.
Hello. I feel a bit bad actually
Go
because
on.
I saw the one with Ashley, and she had such a nice background, and it looks like I'm in the basement.
You could just
I've been,
tilt
I've been
it. I
fritzy.
mean, or is there? Have you got posters on the wall you don't want us to see?
I just realised there's an ironing board behind us, so
Brilliant.
it's
All
not
right.
really.
Well, that's fine. We can work as we are. I mean, it's great. And you're clearly a seasoned pro on the old Zoom with those headphones on, mate.
Yes, and you can see they're broken here as well.
Oh, well, they use
But
that tape, is it?
maybe
Good
it's
stuff.
not a fashion accessory.
Looks a bit like my glasses. Yeah.
Yeah, normally I wouldn't do it. I would switch it out, but there's all sorts of noise going on outside. So it's been interesting actually. One of the things about lockdown is sitting here looking at the neighbours
Right.
opposite, and so for the very first few weeks of lockdown, it was like Christmas, where everyone's just inside and not
What,
going
what
out.
is the view? What is it? Can you
So,
turn it around a sec? Can we
I,
see it? Or
mm,
is we all collapse?
yeah, it might just break
All right. No
the
worries.
break
Go on.
everything.
Describe the
But
view.
essentially, it's the road in front of me. So it's not a main road, but it's kind of one of the side roads that comes through. And then opposite me is another kind of cul-de-sac. So you can see some of the houses of the cul-de-sac. You can see all the cars.
Hmm.
There seems to be a lot of Mercs for some reason. But anyway, you can see the car.
Oh, it's Southwest London, mate. What do you
Well,
expect?
yeah, what can you do? What can you do? And yeah, so like the road was very quiet. And usually there's a school at one end. There's actually a couple of schools around here, so it's usually quite busy. Obviously, rush hour and this, that, and the
Right.
other, and it's a kind of a shortcut as well between two, like the bypass and the main road. And so, obviously, during normal times, it's pretty busy
So
thoroughfare.
you work
And
out of there prior to lockdown anyway, right? So
yeah,
you've
yeah.
got
So
your
I was yeah,
benchmark.
working from home exactly. And so then when you're during this period, what's been interesting is that first, like I said, it's like Christmas at the very beginning when no one's out, all the cars are parked, and then in the last 2 weeks, it's just empty now. People obviously everyone's going to work. There's way more cars running around, and it's kind of looking like it's getting back to normal. I don't know if it should be though.
In some, yeah. Well, that's an interesting point. I mean, as you know, this whole idea is about discussing what is the new normal? Is there a new normal? Are things going to change significantly or not so much? And I think everyone's got a very different view on that, and it's changing day by day, as you say. And I had a conversation actually with Nikki, my partner today, and she was sort of getting a bit nervous about different decisions she had to make about what was acceptable and what isn't. And I said, well, look, no one's going to tell us exactly what to do. The way this works is that they're going to monitor what people's personal response is to this slightly laissez-faire set of guidelines, and and then manage the impacts of those responses in whatever way they can, I suppose. And is that how you see it working?
I think what's interesting here is that it's only been 2 months more or less, right? Say March, mid March, okay, mid March, mid April, mid May,
Seems like
two and a
forever
bit.
though, right?
It does, but it hasn't really been very long. So if you think about how people generally behave, is that you could ask yourself a question in 6 months' time: Are people going to look back on this and wonder what actually, what was all that about? Or
Mm,
are we actually going to incorporate all the changes into our daily life? And I honestly, when you look at, as I was mentioning, the reason to kind of highlight the people opposite the cars and is that it doesn't look like people are changing the way they behave, right? I don't think it's been long enough to ingrain it into people's psyche. Now, of course, we talk to a lot of people about working from home and what they're going to, clients, friends, all the businesses we know, what they're going to do. And I think what is I find quite striking is the extremes that we seem to move towards, right? So as soon as this pandemic hit, suddenly everyone was an expert in working from home. Everyone became like a COVID expert, and you're like, hang on, how did you all suddenly? But you've all been working in offices like a week ago. Now
yeah.
you're all experts of remote working and virtual working, and then so and then during this pandemic, everyone's going, oh, now everything's going to change forever. It's all going to change forever, but it's been 2 months, right? It's not
Mm.
like it's been something that it's always been a gradual move, right? People have always realized they want a better work-life balance, that they want to work more from home, have more time with the kids, have that flexibility. Okay, we've sped that up, but it doesn't mean that you suddenly go from, everyone's in an office to everyone's at home in the
No,
space of two
it,
months, right?
no, I agree. There's definitely shades of grey, and um, I think there's there's the push and pull as well, right? And so yes, individuals have had a taste of the freedoms of flexible working, and they will, or some of those people will think, wow, I want more of this. Others will think, no, it's not for me.
Yeah.
Others will, but on the business side, right? Especially based on the fact that, not a lot happened in terms of, oh look, I've been joined by a pigeon. Um, Not a lot happened in terms of turnover and income for a lot of businesses. And so, we're yet to see what the pull effect is of businesses saying, well, actually, um, we can't afford the premises anymore, or we've worked out that this new model is much more sustainable for us in the long term. So, yeah, we'll see what those responses look like, and clearly in some areas it's impossible to do anyway, right?
I think this is you and I both started businesses, I guess, that were a little bit before their time, right?
Mm,
So we were trying to convince people into new ways of working or new ways of thinking about, in your case, resourcing, in our case, dealing with technology strategy and virtual CTOs and how you do that. And it's got up to this point now where people have realized, oh, actually, you can, you don't have to be, you don't have to shake hands with someone in order to do business with them, right?
mm.
And you
I think it
can,
helps. It does help, but
yeah, it does help, but you don't have to.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
and you also, from your perspective, you can run virtual remote teams,
Hmm.
and it's doable and it's achievable. And I think hopefully what this has made people realize is that everything that they were skeptical to before is actually possible. And I think one of the big things I found quite interesting is having a chat yesterday with a friend of mine who runs a consulting business in Ireland, you know. And actually, he echoes much of what other people are saying, is that he's looking at his office and spend, and he's like, well, why am I spending 12 grand a month on a second office because he was expanding his team, and he's realized that actually you can rotate and do this, but actually all of that was available to you before. So the
Yeah,
question is, why did you take the second office, right?
yeah.
What was the point
Well,
in that?
and either perhaps bad advice or just continuing with the old paradigm, right? And not
That's it. Yeah.
not seeing what else was available or considering what else was available. I mean, yeah, I think we're pretty aligned in our views of those sort of broad things, but I'm really interested in some of what this experience has been like for you from your perspective. Where were you when this all happened?
So I was up in Edinburgh at the time. So I had all these plans. So I had my girlfriend come to visit me, and we were going to be up in Edinburgh, Scotland. Then do like a little. I had some meetings and work and things to do up there, and then we were going to go and do like a whiskey distillery tour, and then help
Nice.
over to Croatia, and I just take a bit of a break because it's been a bit hectic the last X number of months, and then this all came about, and she had to fly back, and
No.
so then I was in Edinburgh, and I realized I was an Airbnb paying someone else's rent or someone else's mortgage, and I was thinking,
Wow.
oh,
Yeah.
why
Yeah.
am I doing this? So I managed to get down towards the end of it because a friend of mine, well, we did a Dominic Cummings, I guess. He had to drop his kids off, so because he shares with his wife, so his kids needed to go back to be with their mother, and
Right.
so on the way back he dropped me off. So we were all
Okay.
very
We
it was all
had you
very
in the
above
boot
board.
because it was 2 meters away, right?
Basically, yes. He had a very long estate card, so it's okay. And so I came back down, and I'm at home now, so I'm actually home with my parents are here as well. And so what was really there was that kind of decision of what should I do? Should I actually come back because they're elderly and at risk? Um, but there's no point in me staying up there and, as I said, paying someone else's mortgage. I might as well come back here and
Yeah.
we have the house. So, and then the second thoughts were, well, hang on, if I'm here now, I can't leave the house because
Yeah.
obviously you
Yeah.
might come back and infect them. But that all kind of petered out simply because you can't keep these people at home. They're like toddlers. They run around. They're out and about all the time anyway.
Was this your
So
parents?
yeah, parents. Yeah, I mean, the older you get, the more you regress, right? So
It's
they're
a,
like, I don't worry about
co-
COVID.
do you mind me asking how old they are?
81 and 76, and they're
Wow.
both they're both fit and active,
Yeah. Yeah.
and so so
Because I was thinking about possibly even interviewing, or I say interviewing, talking with one or both of my parents who have had very different experiences as well. And my mum, for example, was in one of the 1.5 million that got a letter, but she already knew she was majorly at risk. So she was very proactive about protecting our own health around this. But then there's others that just didn't seem to take it very seriously at all, or weren't sure, or Um, but yeah, what was that like then? Sort of coming back and adjusting to a different setting, and
Yeah, I guess the biggest difference is, you know, I either work from home or I usually work from the Sussex Innovation Centre or from the IOD in Pall Mall.
yeah,
So to get out and about, and obviously you've got meetings. I think what I noticed really was the fact that I had way more time now, in the sense that obviously I'm used to working from home, but generally what would happen is that I'd have to go to a meeting somewhere in London, and you'd lose
yeah,
2 hours of your day. You pretty much lose half your day, right? Going between a couple of meetings in London, and then you come back and then you're working till late. And so I found that, okay, I can actually, what am I going to do with my day now that I don't have to travel for backwards and forwards? So then I started incorporating a bunch of stuff that, you know, I probably should have done even when the pre-COVID times, but I hadn't done. And that's, you know, setting up a gym in the garden, because we're lucky
okay,
enough to have gardens, right? So you set up
nice.
that gym in the garden, start spending more time on learning. So take that hour that I couldn't, I'd make it maybe listening to an audiobook or whatever it is, but actually spend the lunch hour catching up on all of those conferences that I missed, and all the, you know,
I was
those.
going to say, what's your go-to format for learning then?
So because so from a tech point of view, you know, Microsoft have been throwing out a lot of stuff recently around their business applications, and obviously MS Build happened, and then there's generally a lot of stuff. I mean, I was on a webinar just recently now with just now with Oracle, and so there's a lot. I think you can overdose on it. I think that's probably the one issue, is that you can suddenly fill up entire days with it.
Yeah,
But I've been just looking at the big summits and then picking out things from that, and it's bite size, right? Half an hour, you can have a
yeah.
sandwich, and that's
So I've been evangelizing for a while now about the Blinkist app because
oh yeah.
I'm not great at reading a whole book, especially not non-fiction. But I do like to sort of keep pace with some of those sort of ideas that can be really helpful when you're trying to innovate for yourself or for clients. And I find that really quite useful.
So, so I'm
Bite size.
multitasking. I'm multitasking on that. I'm actually doing 3 audiobooks at once.
Wow.
That's how I'm
Okay.
rolling with
How
it
many pairs of headphones you got?
now. A lot, actually, a lot. But again, it's one of those things I realized. Well, hang on, what? Because you know how it is starting a business, and when you started Skills Hive, it must have been the same. I mean, Atom's 3 years old now, right?
Yeah,
And the first year is just manic of going out, generating business, building the networks, and the
yeah,
second year is kind of consolidating that. So by the time you kind of come to the third year, you've missed out on all the things that you did previously, like all the. So even when I was working as a CTO, though, I would do a lot of, you know, doing a lot of reading, a lot of kind of
yeah.
education of what's going on in the world. But you were concentrating on one job because that's the role I had. But when you start a business, you suddenly have to do 15 different things, right? You got to do your consulting bit, but you've also got to do sales,
Mm,
manage teams, do
mm,
marketing, figure out all of that. And so you lose the opportunity. And so this was a great time to say, well, now those chunks of time where I'm not actually physically meeting someone and traveling backwards and forwards, I can just use that time for something else, and let's organize the day a little bit better. So in an hour in the morning, getting breakfast instead of watching TV, just listen to audiobook before we go to bed, listen to audiobook, and lunch is either audiobook or one of these presentations, right? Just spend 3 hours of your day at some
okay.
point.
Yeah.
If you can do 3 hours, but generally
No,
a couple of hours.
that makes sense, and the multitasking side of it with the audiobook and stuff certainly makes well, it adds a bit more time to the 24 hours that we have, right?
Well, yeah, I think that the big thing for me was that for the first, because when I came back and started working, because I had the setup here, so you obviously got the screens and everything. For the first, let's say 2 weeks, like I was getting headaches because I was just looking at a screen all day.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
either I was reading something online, or I was obviously working, or you know, having meetings, Zoom meetings. And I think a lot of people recognize the fact that sitting on Zoom meetings all day is really draining, right? But
Mm,
I could feel like my eyes, and I've had great vision for all of my life, and I could feel it was, you know, I was
having an
straining.
effect.
So then I thought, well, hang on, I need to do something about this, and I shouldn't be staring at a screen. I've got like trees outside I can look at, but why not then just use the audiobook? So you can have the audiobook. You don't have to look at anything. You can spend that hour not multitasking, right? So you can actually concentrate on one thing. And I think that's been the key, is learning to stop and do one thing rather than 15.
Yeah, yeah. I used to be absolutely convinced that I could multitask, and you know, I still resist complete focus because I've embraced what I think is a strength, which is I see connections between things pretty quickly and intuitively, and that comes from having done this sort of multitask type behavior for a long time, and I think it's actually it has some value. So I'm going to stick with it for a bit.
Yeah, see, I'm like you. I'm exactly like you. That you obviously that's kind of why we run our businesses, right? Is that we see the connections in different things.
Mm,
So the way I've gotten around with that, because what I realized was, you listen to something, and then so your mind wanders off. So then I got back into post-it notes,
okay.
right? So I thought, well, every time my brain wanders, let's just write it down,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I can come back to it at a point in time when it makes sense, right? So I don't have
Where
to.
are they then? So they're not all over your walls. They're all over the ironing board, are they?
I'm actually, well, yeah, kind of. I'm actually using the post-it pad as a book, which is
Okay, no, that's fine.
it's all right.
But
It's
you can always put them into a home as required as well.
and I do have a whiteboard here somewhere.
Okay, very nice. Well, look, let's shift things along to this idea of return to work. So, as mentioned, you and I both have been flexible working, well, certainly as long as we've run businesses, but also within our corporate lives, I believe as well, right? So for years and years and years. So what I'm interested in, based on what you've said, is how much of these new, more healthy behaviors then do you think you're going to commit to carrying on when you are back to traveling to meetings and um, you know not going to the gym and
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? Right. So it's a question of if everyone goes back to exactly the same way it was before, then no one's ever going to see any benefit of any of this, right? So if we suddenly go back and people force you to come in for a 15-minute coffee chat, right? Then it's going to have to go back to that position where I spend a half a day in London trying to line up as many meetings as possible. But I don't really want to be honest with you. And I think
but
there's got to be
it's within our
yeah,
gift, right? I mean,
yeah.
slightly different in a full-time role, but certainly, you know, people in our sort of position, we can commit to some different decision trees, right?
So it's going to be So I think what's going to be interesting here is to figure out what will other people's expectations be, right? Will other people expect everything to go back to normal, so therefore everyone's behavior should go back to normal, or will they embrace the fact that actually some people don't want to go back to normal, and so you're going to have a divergence. And so if let's say so, a great example is this. When I was up in Edinburgh, the very beginning of in the beginning of April, I had a meeting, and so we were obviously meant to meet face to face, but we couldn't meet face to face. And so I got 8:30 Zoom call, and the Zoom call basically was all he said was that okay, I would like to meet you in person. So can we let's just meet after the lockdown, and we can discuss things in person then. And I said to him, well, hang on, we're on the call now.
Yeah,
I have my laptop. I just need to demonstrate something to you so I can show it to you. He goes, oh no, I'd rather do it in person. So but we're here now. We don't know when we're going to be
yeah,
out of this. It could be September, it could be October. There's a good proposition, like there's something here that we can work together on, and we could work together through this period because it gives you should have more time at least to deal with it. And he's like, no, I want to meet in person. And I thought, well, then you don't really want to do business, right? It's not.
yeah.
Then there's no.
This what so did they give any sort of indication as to what the barriers were for them? Was it
No. It was more like the longs that you come to the office, meet the team, this, that, and the other.
mm,
And I was like, yeah, that's all fine and well, but again, Zoom meetings, you can get people from all over the world on a web chat, and
yeah,
we've been able to do this for many
yeah,
years
yeah,
now, right? So
exactly.
it's not new.
Someone was complaining about that on some of the naming no names Microsoft Teams adverts, where,
Yeah.
where it was like, oh, it's a revelation. Oh, I just scared the pigeons away. Oh, it's a revelation, and it's like, well, no, not really.
It is
um,
weird, isn't it?
yeah, it is strange, but yeah, what was I thinking? So going back to this person that wasn't really keen to progress even a conversation over
Mm.
a video call. It sort of seems like then there's people that look at what things were like before and think um, that worked. Why do we want to change? And there's others that will think, well, that wasn't really working, so maybe we can change a bit. And there's others that will think, well, that really was a bit of a mess and it was a nightmare for me. I'm definitely changing. I mean, that's oversimplifying it, but
Yeah.
clearly everyone's got a different experience and comes from a different start point. So thinking about that again in a wider field then of um, the future of the economy. I mean, we both know Nigel quite well, and I remember saying to Nigel in the office over in Croydon when this was just starting, "Oh yeah, you know, pound's going to be worth nothing eventually. You know, there'll be no air travel." And he's going, "Oh, get a grip, mate." And, but I was just throwing out there some sort of like, you know, this could be the end of everything as we know it. And yeah, clearly that's not the case. But I certainly see it as an opportunity for us to think about things, reflect, and those people that do have influence to think, well, can we do a version of what we did before in a more sustainable way, in a more humane way, in a more ethical way, you know? But
It,
clearly, not
it,
everyone shares my principles, but everyone has principles of a sort, right?
well, this is the thing. I mean, we're it, for many businesses, it can't actually get worse, right? So it's either do or die. You change or you die, right? And I think this is perhaps the best opportunity to tackle some of the biggest issues because actually people have seen that they can cope and survive and deal with it. Okay, businesses are affected, of course, but you know, with the government is willing to put money in behind industries in order to save them and deal with that, right? So if
Mm,
there's that appetite there now, then okay, maybe there is some reordering that needs to be done and reallocation of funds, right? And that would make sense because
yeah.
obviously this is not going to be the last time something like this happens, right? Um,
But doesn't that sort of it's similar like in 2008? So I saw that as an opportunity to just press reset on the whole economic infrastructure, and it
yeah.
and that someone bottled it somewhere, right? But again, we're in a very different position, but that same sort of opportunity arises, and you know, but then quantitative easing, well, it sort of makes a mockery of the whole system. Similarly, with all the bailout mechanics this time around, I think you know we're all grateful for it, and it was the right thing to do. But it sort of is just more evidence that the system just is a bit of a fallacy anyway, right?
Well, this is the whole thing, you know, politics. I mean, we could spend hours talking about that. I think what's
Yeah, I'm gonna have to wrap this up soon though.
yeah, it's one of those things where there is a will, right? But no one's ever. So the 2008 is a great example of there was a real will of the people to get something changed,
Mm,
but there
mm,
was no will in the government to
mm.
rock the status quo. Now, for whatever reasons,
Well, it's a big
the
old task, isn't it? And where do you go? And where are the alternatives? I
but we
don't know.
owned the like we owned RBS, right? We owned the
Well,
banks.
yeah.
So this is so what no better chance of doing it. And then of course there's a question of should the government be doing all this, that, and the other. But
Well, and then
what
it is well, that's a step backwards. So we're going back to pre-privatization, you know, and
but there's got to be a middle ground. There's got to be a sensible way of tackling saying, look, there are these systemic problems that we've got. We need to tackle them and do something about it, address them rather than just hide from them, right? It's interesting because there was the podcast that I did recently on conflict resolution, the one I released today, I think. Uh, you know, we talk about getting ahead of it, right? If you're going to talk about if you know something's brewing, just you know if there's an issue you have with someone, don't just sit on it, hide it,
mm,
go and talk to
mm,
them, and then get it out there in the open and understand it. Now everything is out in the open at the moment, right? So this is the best time to talk about everything and really understand. Okay, because it's shown the weaknesses in society, right?
yeah,
What happen? How do you deal with vulnerable people who you know people victims of abuse? How do we deal with the homeless? Like we suddenly managed to get all the homeless people off the streets in a
yeah.
weekend, right? How
Well,
did
pollution. The some. I
yeah.
mean, I'm not saying that that's more of an issue, but some of the images from India, China, when the factories were no longer operational, were unbelievable. How quickly the planet seemed to start recovering, right?
Yeah, I mean, so I've got friends of mine who work for the NHS, and one of my friends is a cancer doctor, and he's managed to do his appointments online using Teams. And what he said to me was quite striking: is that
Was he
you know
in
this
the advert?
no, he's not, he's not unfortunately, but you know he said to me that you know the pandemic's just accelerated the uptake of IT by
Yeah,
20 years. You know how many years has the government trying to digitize the NHS,
yeah,
right? How
yeah,
many billions were spent doing that? So this
yeah,
pandemic, in the everyone got onto Microsoft Teams within the NHS within 2 weeks. So how
yeah,
did it take £4 billion to
yeah,
fail, right?
yeah.
So like
Uh,
it beggars belief, and I think that's the thing, right? It's the old entrenched way of doing things, and now that we've shown that at a pinch we can go and get these things done, why do we need
build
to?
momentum
Yeah,
around. I
exactly.
remember, yeah. So there was what about the ventilator? They reversed engineered an alternative ventilator to fill the gap in supply, and that I think was a couple of. Well, it was a university or and a hospital that collaborated on that project. And within, I think it was 3 weeks, 4 weeks, they had a working prototype MVP. They were ready to start production. Oh yeah, that was it. I think it was the Mercedes Benz F1 garage.
Yeah,
No,
yeah, yeah,
or
yeah.
was it Mercedes or McLaren? Oh, I don't know. I'm gonna get
It was
sued or
a
something now for.
Formula One. Or was, yeah, it was a
Yeah,
car.
it was
Yeah,
one or the other beginning with M. Um, but going back as well to the Microsoft references, um, I was watching I was watching the almost rocket launch yesterday on the NASA TV
yeah.
online with Elon Musk's SpaceX
SpaceX. Yeah,
first commercial hardware, at least, manned into space. Now, these guys are touted as philanthropists these days, right? Uh, in some ways, still very
yeah,
much involved in you know the economy, but certainly Bill Gates with. Did you see his TEDx from about 5 years ago? I think
yeah.
where he
2016 or
sort
whatever.
of
Is it? No,
said, "Look, we
no.
need to prepare for this. It's going to happen." That no one can deny that he saw that, right? Now, how far do you think we can trust and perhaps invite the likes of Bill Gates, Elon Musk, and, well, dare I say it, Jeff Bezos, to help shape the future of this global economy, or are they just got too much of a conflict of interest?
Well, there's obviously the conflict of interest, but I think if you think about it, all they're doing is shining a spotlight on work that people have already done, right? Bill Gates didn't figure this out.
No, no,
It
no.
was figured out by
No,
a
but
whole
I
bunch of
mean in
people
terms
around.
of having the power to influence change and in potentially even fund change, to switch paradigms in some way economically.
Yeah, but I think their role should be more about spotlighting things and bringing the people who are actually doing the work into the fore, right? Into the foreground, and actually showing that these people exist. This is the work that's doing. This is the consequence of what's actually happening on the ground.
Mm,
And so, if thing is happening on the ground at this moment in time, the consequences in X number of years, if we don't deal with it, are going to be, why. And and I think that's where you need them to be able to use the stage of the platform that they've got to highlight
mm,
these kinds of things, but not actually express an opinion generally, right? Because that's when you start dividing people,
mm,
because then that's when people start talking about conspiracy theories and vested interests.
yeah.
So
Well,
take that away, and actually get the people who are doing the work on the ground, and spotlight those guys, right? And that's what you don't see the, apart from climate change where everyone's going to bashing the scientists, right? And there's no, everything is everything has now become political. There are other areas where you can allow the experts in the field and people on the ground to go and talk about what's actually happening to people
yeah,
and how these things will actually impact the greater population further
yeah,
down the line.
absolutely. Well, I think that's probably a great place to finish, and I think you know, if there's anyone else you know who has a story that they could share, this, your friend in the NHS would be really interested to hear what this experience has been like for them. And like you say, it is about, if we can share, or people can at least view and listen and understand the breadth and range of stories of what people have experienced and where they think we could go, then maybe those with the power and influence to make change happen will sort of be able to at least take into account a good representation of where we're at. But
We
look,
need the power, my friend. We need the power and influence, right? That's
well,
give it to
this
us.
is. I'm not even. I will save that for another day. But I mean, things like distributed technologies is another option here, right? But I've got all sorts of ideas I want to explore now. But I think we better leave it there. But maybe we'll get you back for part two soon, Bhairav. Really appreciate you coming along. Look, thanks for watching, listening, or reading the subtitles if I work out how to add them. And we'll bring you another lockdown story very soon on the Skills Hive page on LinkedIn. Thanks, everybody. Take care.